Listen, this is my 4th panel today, and it's a lot. So thank you for the
It is your fault.
Speak for yourself.
I did this to me.
What are you saying? We're not like the special first panel that you've had today?
No, this is like the panel that I am so ready for. Every panel's been amazing, but it's like going in like a crescendo.
Good save.
And Alex, this is the first panel I've been on with you or Mike today. So I'm excited. All right, here we go. Before I put my foot in my mouth any further. So today we're going to talk about I want to hit the description. The art of crafting memorable and challenging encounters in video games and tabletop games, complete with interactive examples. We'll figure out what those are along the way. So, all right, hey everybody. So first of all, my name's Noah. I'm a lawyer. I'm a cool lawyer. I represent content creators and game developers and publishers. I also have a podcast, an actual play podcast called Forgotten Pats. If you haven't subscribed and downloaded, you have a couple seconds. Okay, cool.
You missed your chance.
And so I'm also a professional GM, and I work with some amazing, amazing creators, and I get to see some epic encounters every day. Robert, who are you?
I am so happy to be here. I'm a former tavern owner turned into professional DM thanks to COVID, and I can't wait to talk about all the times I've traumatized Sam.
Wait, I get to do that too.
Yeah.
Not nearly as much,
Dubla.
I'm gonna get bullied today.
Always.
What the heck? I'm Sam. I am a player on a lot of their tables.
Yep.
I got dirt on them.
Thank you.
Sam's also a Twitch partner and Twitch ambassador.
We don't need to talk about those. But I also work for Windy Warrior Project, where I go and produce as well as cast and play in a lot of our actual plays for charity.
And my name's Mike Shalai. I'm an illustrator and cartographer. I've been working with Wizards of the Coast for about 20 years now. I map the realms, whether that's the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk, or I do a lot of other projects for things like Sorcery, Steve Jackson's Sorcery, which is a mobile series which went over pretty well and was super fun. But I work for a lot of book and game publishers and spend a lot of time building worlds that I hope people enjoy playing in.
It's so cool. Woo! Woo!
Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Smith. I am the GM of the actual play podcast Quid Pro Roll. I professionally GM at events, conventions, stuff like that. I also run a comic book and gaming shop in Richmond, Virginia called Alpha Comics and Games.
Let's go.
I mean, you could applaud for all the things I do. Would also be super cool. That'd be awesome for all those things. But
you're still in brick and mortar. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's 2024 and you're still here. Let's go.
Kicking old school as well as I can. But those are the things that I do.
And hello everyone, Andy Lunique, aka Chef Andy Lunique. I am the Director of Creative Marketing at Bungie, and I'm also the freshest D&D player on this panel. Yeah. And I've recently been learning some wonderful things, and I am also a writer of the Ultimate Gaming Cookbook, a book dedicated to making food for campaigns as such. So that is my world, and it's a pleasure to see you all.
100% the most delicious Twitter on the planet.
Yeah, oh my God.
Andy, that Twitter's on fire, and I just can't deal with it anymore.
At one point in time.
Yeah, Andy, if you want some amazing pancake content, go follow Andy on socials. I can't describe it. It's so fluffy. So here, guys, we're here to talk about what makes an encounter epic, how to make epic encounters, what are the different variables going in. So what we did was we brought together somebody that knows content creation, somebody that knows GMing, somebody that knows map making and also world building, someone that knows how to dial out when they roll out.
Excuse me, no, I haven't died except for once.
Okay.
He can't kill me yet. He's
can't
tried.
kill you yet. And a professional GM and a lawyer for some fucking reason. So without further ado, we're going to kind of dive into it. The first thing I want to kind of get from the audience is, out there, how many of you are GMs or developers or somebody that creates encounters in your life? Amazing! Congratulations for you.
Let's go.
How many of you have played a tabletop game or played a video game where you have experienced an epic encounter? That should be everybody, by the way. Okay, cool. That was my way of saying who doesn't like to raise their hands. I'm looking at you. Thank you all for coming to this panel. We're going to talk a little bit about all of that. So, first of all, panelists, what makes an encounter epic? What's the definition of an epic encounter?
Can I field that?
Oh, yeah. Everyone, jump in.
When you come face to face with the unknown and do not have a handle on it, but are forced to acknowledge it and acknowledge the fact that it's standing right there in front of you, that's epic. Because whether it's in real life or whether it's in a game, the fact is that, so I spent my thesis, which I for some reason went back to grad school and spent a lot of money and time working on a MFA. But the entire time I was there, I was considering what it meant to stand in the face of the unknown.
Yeah.
And in those moments, whether it's in our lives or whether it's you sitting at the table across from a player or a DM, creating something that did not exist before. I mean, like as a map maker or as a designer, I can design things all day, but the magic happens when I sit across from someone at a table that I am absolutely not in control of, and that has the capacity to create something that I am not the author of. I can author things and I can do things, but when the rubber hits the road is when that, I don't want to say synergy because it's not like you're building something, but when something's created in the process of letting go of your authorship in a way that sort of hands it off to the other person at the same time that they're doing that with you, creates something epic that's indescribable.
That's an incredible answer, and I'm not going to follow it.
It's about real stakes
Yeah.
and not knowing where this is going to go.
Right.
You read the room and you look at your players' faces at the roller coaster that has begun, and it can shift. There is the beginning, the middle, and the end. You don't know where it's going to go, and it can be highs and lows at any point of that beginning, middle, and end. And hopefully, your epic encounters have some sort of trajectory and flow that goes between. Because when we have those epic encounters that swing one-sided way, especially when the dice gods and RNGesus do not bless any of us, and it is going poorly, and you're looking, some people are all of a sudden standing, there's hands on hips, there is true fear and worry, and as a DM, I am rooting for my players. I am ready for them to turn this, and I'm going, please, someone roll a 20 here. Yeah. It is getting dire. I am literally praying for them. I'm looking to see any way I can divine intervention to help these folks.
Ex machina.
But somehow the dice always tell us a story, whether that's the story we want or whether it's one that we didn't expect. And that's the beauty of it. And sometimes it's completely the other way. A good old-fashioned squash to make your players feel like the heroes that they are. Hey, embrace it. And look at those smiles as well.
Yeah.
Those are it is two total different experiences that are both awesome in their own right.
I'm actually really glad you said feeling, because that's what the epic encounters are for me. It is something that has emotional resonance for everyone at the table, whether that is something that was like narratively planned, like your player gave you a knife for their backstory that you're finally revealing, like, oh yeah, that big bad evil guy your character Luke's been going after, yeah, it's your father. Sorry. Fun
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you guys. If you didn't know that by now, I've got nothing for you. But if you can set up an encounter for your players, be it a combat encounter with a big boss or something that they've been ready for, and that like the players are starting to feel that overwhelming sense of impending doom or justice or victory, being able to construct an NPC that they fall like deeply and passionately in love with, and then maybe threatening them to push your players in the direction that they're trying to go. But anything that you can do that will bring emotional resonance, not just to their characters, but to the players themselves, is when, in my mind, when you walk away from the table, if that's still sitting on you, you have done something sufficiently epic.
Yeah.
Can I mention something in direct relation to that? So sometimes that epic encounter exists when you create a character that everybody hates, but the entire story is pivoting around a single action. So for instance, Frodo would have become the Dark Lord if Gollum had not bit off his finger.
Yep.
I've never had anybody just outright say that before. That's a good point.
I'm now spiraling. I need to see that version right now.
Yeah, that's wild.
Give me the dark director's cut now, Peter Jackson.
Please, the Doctor, the Snyder cut of Lord of the Rings.
Extended.
I realized that I needed Gollum in a lot of my early campaigns to bite that finger.
Yep. One of the questions I actually have specifically for Andy as well is when we're defining what an epic encounter is. Andy, as someone who does creator marketing, and, you play D&D, you play video games and stuff like that, but specifically with your perspective on creator marketing and Twitch in particular, well, what's an epic encounter for you in terms of, like, with a viewer? What kind of things do you look for, like with chat interaction particularly? How does that kind of play in?
So I've noticed, especially over the last several years, since the popularity has been surging for great reasons, and I've seen a lot of lovely stories being told, I realized that the times where chat is in what we call hype mode at all times is when they're all starting to get their own little stories and what they would do, how they would react, or what they know their favorite creator to do in this moment is. Essentially, they know them so well, they go, I know exactly how this is going to go. It's going to go sexually immediately. Or it's going to be the kind of thing where they can start to relate to the individual that they're watching. For a new viewer, if you understand the stakes immediately in those epic encounters, you've got a fan for life.
Yeah.
It's exactly why so many folks have started to jump on, because they catch these moments in those short form videos where it's a micro story, it's a minute long. You understood everything within 1 minute, and now you're a fan, you want more. That has been the ultimate reason why it's been growing so much. So when you have the opportunity to tell those stories, if you're a solid person who's able to kind of capture those moments in time, that little bubble gives someone a whole new world, and then you build more community off that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take on it.
I love that. And Sam, to kind of round it out about our definitions of an epic encounter, as someone who is both GM but also I've seen just take over playing a ton, as a player, what is an epic encounter for you?
If I feel like I'm gonna cry, it's usually a good sign.
Good.
Robert's good at making me cry.
Yeah, I'm bad at making you
But
cry.
I will say, so currently in a Robert campaign, one of my fellow table mates, we play a married couple, which is already high stakes because if something happens to them emotionally, we're so invested in one another's backstories. He loves to mess with us.
What I'm hearing is Robert's.
It's really epic when we survive in the end. It is really romantic, isn't it? It's kind of romantic. Yeah, it's real sweet and everything. But that's pretty. That's an epic encounter to me. Whenever I feel wholly emotionally like involved, and just as you were saying, yeah, it's super emotional as a player. Then you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna think about this for the next 6 months.
That helps establish stakes like that because you guys came into the game that way, so there's already so much value inside your own players' interactions that come with that. Because we've met the family, we know the parents, the step parents. We've been at the house, we've ate there. We know their child. There's this whole extra level of if they don't come home, we know what it's like to be in that household. Somebody's going to have to deliver that message. That's virally human in its sense, and you feel that, and nobody, whether it's the most on the outskirts edgelord character that may be in the group, they don't want to have to go and deliver that message. Even they care, even if it may be just that fractional amount that establishes something.
So that's a great way to kind of segue into the next part of the conversation is like, how do you create an epic encounter? What are the stakes that go into it? Is it creating stakes? Is it can you just manufacture an epic encounter easily, or like what goes into it?
Music for me.
Yeah.
Like first thing, like it's how I've always built my actual plays. It sets the standard. It sets the tone. It can bring RP out of anyone. I highly encourage everyone, especially if you're not a live AP, if you're just playing with your friends, the world is your oyster. Bring every Final Fantasy moment that you have to life, every piece of video game music you've ever heard, anything that you want to heighten that kind of moment, you have access to. And even on the AP side, there are catalogs on catalogs, artlist.io, MusicVine, Epidemic Sound. There's a wealth of resources for you to sit, catalog, and bring those moments from here to there.
And make sure, hey, lawyer here, make sure it's licensed, by the way.
Licensed catalogs.
Sound effects that you have, make sure you get a licensed catalog. If you don't know how to do that, hi, my name's Noah. I'm a lawyer. I have a card. But make sure you do license. But music is an incredible way to do it. I mean, think about it like on the video game side of things. The first time you heard the epic Halo music, Marty O'Donnell's here at MAGFest. So you heard like the da-da-da-da, like that, and you just dove straight in at the end. Oh my, I'm getting like choked up thinking about it actually. And it's like the final ride at the end of one of those games. Creating those music is incredible for creating an epic encounter. Also specifically, the layout, frankly, a map, like a good, well-drawn map, and knowing how the encounter is laid out too, right, Mike?
Yeah, so on the one hand, I love being able to build rich environments that people play in. One of the things that fascinates me, though, especially in storytelling and building a scene, is not showing everything at once.
Right.
A excellent illustration of that is what made Alien so terrifying was that you didn't see the monster for so long, you know? You see its effects, you see what it's doing, you build and ratchet up that tension so that your characters, I mean, you could just say, boo, and they would leap.
Mm-hmm. I still have trauma of air vents.
Yeah.
There's no safety.
I mean,
That's just Among Us, though.
I watched, my dad took me to Poltergeist when it first came out in the movie theater. And oh my God, I was scared of trees and, clowns for years. I couldn't sleep with my closet door open for years because not that there was ever anything in there, obviously, but just the fear that something could be around the corner. Right. And if you can build that into an encounter, your characters' minds will build out the rest.
Right.
You know, so just little, like I love putting little details into, I just worked on a map where there's, it's a beautiful bucolic sort of marsh scene, but in one little portion there's a rowboat that's adrift, and there's a splash of blood on the side, and on the edge of the water there's a little child's sailboat that's been discarded. And the implication builds in the player or builds in the people's minds that are reading that something that you can't write yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, just our reactions alone that's exactly what you want.
And there's all those little details. A lot of times us as DMs, we fall in love with the map for a multitude of reasons. Yeah. And we don't even see those details until our players manifest those details.
Bugs.
Oh,
the amount of bugs we found because one of us was a kinku.
It's so good.
You know, Tolkien started with a map.
Yeah, he did.
And allowing those little details to spawn stories that aren't written into the map but are implied, or just little seeds. They're essentially story seeds.
I'll say that in Forgotten Pats, we do have an episode that we have lovingly entitled Escape the Butt Kraken. Because it was either Chapeko or Tom Kartos maps. They have this amazing map that I saw, and I was like, I have an idea. And it's a dead kraken on a beach. And I was like,
it's Chase, yeah.
Yeah, it's Che. Yeah, it's Che.
Yep.
And so you go and basically the adventure that we did. You want to tell this one, Sam? You actually played this one twice.
I have played this 3 times.
Yes, you have.
3 times.
Plays this map the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically you get to a point where you can't go in the way that you came in.
Which is the mouth.
There's only one exit.
You have to go out the butt.
Yeah.
And so it creates an epic encounter every single time because the map has lent itself to the creators getting in. They can't go out the way they came in, and so they get pooped out of the dead butt kraken.
Yeah, everyone's going to remember the Dungeons & Dragons Magic School Bus episode that ended poorly. Everyone is going to
I
remember
couldn't post
that.
mine to YouTube. It was just, it's gone. It's
There isn't a hamster hidden in that map somewhere.
Poor Limmy Winks.
Oh no!
Poor Libby.
I wasn't expecting that from you.
Sorry, that's an inside joke about a D&D.
Yeah. So,
There could
so
be a whole panel on that.
I will say that
I was not ready for this panel.
another building block of a really cool and epic encounter is putting in the work for every encounter that's not epic. Because if you just go from high to high to high to high, and it's high stakes and it's high emotion all the time, your players are going to get worn out and they get tired of those high stakes. They need denouement. They need some resting time. They need some time to recuperate and build relationships. Because the relationships between characters in video games, in tabletop, in any story is what lends themselves to stakes. You don't have stakes unless you have relationships. So for example, in the Forgotten Paths podcast, it's an amnesia campaign. And so, as the GM, I created all the characters, and then they figured out who they were as they started to play through it. So I knew their relationships, and I was able to reveal certain aspects of their backstory based on what they were finding. But I was also able to kind of do it in a key way that would lend itself to epic encounters because I was about to say, oh, you need to know this for this, and then it just increased the stakes on it because I didn't know, oh, wait, I can probably get out of that kind of thing.
I think you mastered that quite well, because I think in our latest campaign, you slowly made me want to kill my teammates.
Yes.
And I was obviously not meant to do that, at least that's the intention, but you kept adding little kernels that made me, I want to say, increasingly evil, but I was still, using a briefcase.
Yep.
So it feels like over time, I would have eventually killed Justin. Absolutely. Even after he robbed the store. I felt like it was just enough information to make me feel like I'm starting to attach myself or disconnect from these individuals. So that was a good way to go about
And
it.
Thank you.
that drip feed works in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I can say this from my love of Destiny and all those years, Andy, is that I love that they don't skimp on letting the big bad communicate to you while you get to the end.
Yeah.
The worst regret as you have as a DM is you've created a concept in your mind and you think that this big bad truly is what I want to lay on my players, and not giving them enough voice to get there and communicating that somehow through whatever environment you are to getting to them is continually increasing the stakes, because they can interact and make those players fear something more, think about something that they didn't previously, or all of a sudden maybe even question if they are the good guys or not. Between that interaction, that's what we always want to do with our villains. We want to think of them as they're doing the right thing. Ultimately, they don't think they're the villain. They think the opposite. They think the party are the villains. So if we can do that in more ways, and I will challenge you within your epic encounters, I don't care what the time is supposed to be between turns. Let your players and the villains talk it out whenever they can. Get those RP moments in the encounter. It helps break up the monotony of the math and everything else and brings us back in to the performance. Right. So let them have this back and forth dialogue all over the place. It's so worth it, and it's what makes those encounters go from not memorable to memorable.
Yeah, if you don't have time to say I'll never let you go, Jack, I don't really care about the end of Titanic. So.
One of the things that really helps with that is good food. So having a meal at the table, I think, allows for that kind of conversation to occur in beautiful ways.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stay here and blush a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah.
What are good snacks?
So one of the other things, when you're doing one-shots, so obviously we're talking about long-form campaigns, long-form video games. We're talking about epic encounters generally. Obviously, a lot of this is through the lens of tabletop, but because that's what we have some subject matter experts up here for. But when you're talking about shorter encounters, so short-form things like one-shots or one-page dungeons, which you can actually get from Goblins and Growlers. Amazing people in the front row. One-page dungeons, one-shots, short-form kind of stuff. How do you create an epic encounter? Is it as simple as saying, oh, you know what? Godzilla, let's just ratchet up the challenge rating. What does it look like?
So my favorite one-shot, one-page dungeon thing that I've ever written was called The Forest of Hair. Thank you. The Forest of Hair is an adventure where the party comes into this really desolate town and they keep talking about this horrible haunted forest, which is very, okay, cool, it's a haunted forest. But as they go through the forest, there's just something in the woods. And as they go deeper and deeper into the forest, there's more and more hair from whatever this enormous creature is, just twisted around. You find out that it's creating like pods, and it's like it's got digested skeletons coming out of it. You find that it's like so sharp that it can cut you if you walk through. I played a lot of Corpse Party before I wrote this adventure, just so you guys know. And basically, the entire adventure is just building up stress and fear of whatever is in the woods. So by the time you finally get to the creature of the hair in the center, whatever they've constructed in their heads is infinitely bigger and scarier and better than what I've had. So I specifically wrote out like, hey guys, it's in a cocoon of hair. Go figure the rest out yourselves. But because I spent the entire adventure basically setting it up to build that tension, that fear until that one encounter, no matter how it is run, tends to be really impactful because they've spent the whole adventure building to it.
So it sounds like if you're going to do a one-shot or a short-form content, you really only have, if you only really have a chance to get one encounter, it is ramp it up as hard as you can, is what you're saying.
I really think that if you're going to be doing a one-shot or a one-page dungeon, you need to have a final goal in mind that is easy and natural to get to. Otherwise, you're going to run into it not having enough direction to feel satisfying.
Right. Now,
have that release. Sorry for phrasing.
Yeah. Good job, Andy. Phrasing. Now,
It doesn't.
It's our secret.
We were all here.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I stress people to think about 16-bit theory when it comes down to like a one shot. So the reason we love this era of pixel art, whenever somebody looks at pixel art, you all see a different image because it's giving us a base, and it's as close to reading a novel as you can get with a visual form, because we all in our own mind's eye look at that piece of art, interpret it different inside of our heads. So you give, if you give less when you're in this build-up and you're letting everyone live their own horror, you're giving that just bit of that taste. You can emulate that kind of pixel art theory. Don't overgive. Give just enough for people to create inside their heads, because everybody has a different version of Kane Highwind in their head that they lived in Final Fantasy, to any other, to Chrono Trigger, to all those. Those are great examples of how the same story was told to all of us, but it's so drastically different in all of our heads.
Now, I will say that we've been talking predominantly about encounters that involve combat up here. I also want to talk a little bit about encounters that don't involve combat, because those to me are just as impactful as combat encounters. In fact, because it's a tabletop role-playing game instead of a roll with 2 L's playing game, I would say that emotional encounters are also incredibly important. One of my favorite encounters. You ready, Sam?
Yes. Go ahead and say your thing.
One of my favorite encounters, without spoiling too much about Forgotten Paths, because you're all going to listen because you're downloading it, is I'm nothing if not a good shill. Is a moment where the players confront a particular deity or a demi-deity that they have been dealing with the entire time, because they recently found out she's actually related to one of them, and she's been hiding that the entire time. And that's actually Sam's character. So Sam, you can talk about it if you want. But that was definitely
because they're all downloading it. I don't want to spoil anything.
That's right, because they're going to listen. But that's an encounter that you create that is not necessarily a combative encounter, but it's there's emotional lifting. It's got a lot of building to it. It's got all of the building blocks that we have here, and it does lead to an emotional release. So
yes, which is from player side, when it comes to those emotional encounters, because we talked about building up those relationships with your fellow player characters and making sure you take those beats of moment for proper role play and getting to know one another and finding out why you're still together. We built it was like a 2.5-year long campaign.
Yeah.
And there's consequences to every action. So there was an occurrence that happened well into the campaign with my character trying to save the life of one of our other player characters to a point where Robert does these skill checks.
Skill checks.
Yeah, skill checks. So it's not combat, but there is still a role involved. There's that high stake where you have to hit certain numbers with each skill check. And he gives you options of you have 1 luck, you have 1 dice or a inspiration.
Yeah, there's some stuff that's additive to it, but at the end of the day, we're going to do a skill check that may go from a DC of 18, 20, 22. And if they roll a 1 at any point in time on this, it's over. We respect 1s and 20s in our game to where that is the finality. Nothing can return from that, so that there is a line. So if any time in this, when we're rolling these skill checks, we know there's a 5% chance.
There's a high stake.
That this is going to go wrong. The same way, if you roll a 20, that skill check is over, and you've conquered the mountain. But it is this stress of these
you love
3
that
rolls
that you're
have to
watching,
come.
visibly upset that their character might pass if you don't save them.
Yeah.
And I rolled a 1 with them in my arms, and they died.
So this
And
would
it
be in a
was-
whatever that's revivify, resurrection,
last roll, too,
reincarnation.
and
It
it was
doesn't
very
matter. We're making,
emotional.
because at the end of the day, we want to roll. We are addicted to rolling. So as much stuff as we can roll for.
Cue Limp Bizkit.
That emotional combat is.
Gonna keep
a
rolling. Yep.
But yeah, so that's a combat in itself. It doesn't have to be, I want to swipe a sword at this guy. It's I just want to save the life of my friend.
The best non-combat. I recently did a guest thing with Dungeons and Drake and Beams where I ran a Christmas-themed advent calendar game for them where they released an episode every day for 24 days.
Oh my God.
It was based off of this very grim Christmas-themed episode of A Quiet Year. And the end of the adventure, they find out that the person they've been working for is actually the BBG. And they confront them, and I am openly weeping in character as this BBG as I'm giving them all of the reasons that they did this. And all of the players stop, and I had the combat encounter ready to go, and they're like, no, we need to help her. And there was this whole moment, 3 of my 4 players cried, which whenever I'm doing something major, my goal is my players crying. That is always my goal.
That's healthy.
I don't care if it's out of joy or out of anger. Tears must fall at some point. And because 3 of my 4 players cried at that, and there was this huge emotional encounter, I was like, no, this combat is gone. We're not, there is no superior moment than this. And I've been chasing that high ever since Christmas.
Sometimes you have to pivot on those big moments like that, because they do. They capture everybody, and before you know it, you're like, this is my Disney moment. My God.
If I could have broken out into song, I would have. It would have been great.
Now, a question that I have for all of you is obviously whenever you're jamming or running an adventure of any sort or writing an adventure, there's an element of, do I want to lean into this with rule of cool? Do I want to do rules as written? How can I heighten the epicness by fudging? And the question is, do you fudge? Do you ever lean into it? Do you ever?
0.
Well, I know your answer.
Why bother fudge when we have game of chance?
Yeah.
It's that easy.
But
it's going to do it for you.
I guess the question becomes, if a player has the opportunity to do something and they say, this is not rules as written, but I think that I can fudge it and make a rule of cool and heighten the epicness, is that something that you would do? Allow them to do?
If I could chime in. No, it's a counter question.
Yeah.
I feel like skill has a little bit to do with whether or not you're comfortable fudging through it. But it feels like it's implied. Wouldn't you assume that if you want to let them kind of build and pivot in any way that they want, I feel like that makes a better game. I don't want to say that I'm what's the word I want to use? Overly strict is what I'm going to say, as you've experienced.
Yep.
And I've broken every rule you've ever had.
Every one of them.
But I feel like that is just a richer experience from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And I've never actually been through a campaign where folks were just so rigid. There's always been some room for
wiggle.
Improv is what I'll call it.
All depends on the game that you're playing with the group that you're playing with. You set the expectations, whether you're playing rules as written or whether you're playing a story base. That is for you and your friends, and every one of those games are valid regardless of anything else and the conjecture you hear from anyone else. It's about setting those expectations down at the table, and if you have this epic story-based table and you have the leeway to go, all I want to do is look at people like the movie Hook, and I go, when they finally realize they can play as a kid and they're gonna ask me to push for a little bit extra and go for this imaginative, creative thing that no one else could ever thought of. And I just reach over and go, "It's you, Peter. It's you." And they realize they're Peter Pan finally at the table. Then it unlocks everything.
I actually want to ask a particular audience member this question who came in about halfway through. We have Gabe Hicks here. Gabe James Games, what's up?
Wow.
Welcome in. Come on up.
Get on up.
Gabe is Story GM of Story and Screen. Gabe, you want to tell people where you've been found and seen and designed?
Sure. My name is Gabe Hicks. I ran a season on Dimension 20 called Shriek Week. I have done game design for Critical Role. I have written for Pathfinder, Starfinder, the Dark Souls RPG, the Fallout RPG. I got to sit on Brennan's lap during the live show at
I remember that.
Yeah, it was great. He was my mom, and he just let me sit there for 10 minutes.
Wow. That's cool. So Gabe, kind of hearing a little bit about what we've been saying for the last 10 minutes on this, 45-minute panel so far. I will say, what do you think about fudging and doing Rule of Cool and how to build an epic encounter?
Something that I've done often is reinforce you're not going to fail this roll. The point of you rolling is how well you succeed this roll. It's that notion of like, okay, you know what? Your character has a plus 13. You're probably not going to land on your face. Unless you roll a 1 and you decide you want to land on your face. But if you roll a 2 plus 13 and it's a 15, your character's probably still pretty damn good at it. So the idea of the roll isn't that you're going to fail, the roll is your level of success.
Right.
Because especially in games like D&D, the concept of level of success is so hard to nail down when it's arbitrary numbers. In games where you're counting successes, it's a little bit easier to figure that out. But games like D&D and Pathfinder, when it's so much more on the GM's responsibility, giving them the power of how well do you succeed means that they're not going to be concerned about how well they do it. And in my experience, more often than not, people are willing to narrate their own slight failures if they know that it's not a total failure.
Gotcha. Okay.
So like even the notion of like fudging it, if it's, well, another thing, it's like the difference of, is the performance meant to be intense or are you just playing for fun? If you're playing for fun and a failure's not fun for anyone at the table, it's okay to throw it out. Mm-hmm. If you have to follow the rules and no one enjoys it, then why are we playing the game?
Right. Yeah, and I think that there's ways to create epicness and epic encounters that don't require you to fudge. If your player has something cool and it's like, okay, how do you want to do this kind of thing, you know that, hey, this is going to be the final. You've rolled, you've hit it. You can nail and describe something cool. Letting your player narrate something really neat, even if it's not like rules is written, is pretty cool. I remember one of the first times I ever GM'd, and this was way back. This is way back. One of my players wanted to, they were fighting a T-Rex. This is the whole thing. They were fighting a T-Rex, and I was like, okay, they rolled, they were going to hit, they were going to kill the T-Rex. How do you want to do this? They said, I want to slide under the T-Rex's belly and shove my sword up. I was like, I could make you do like an acrobatics, athletics check, something in there, or I could just let you do it because it's really neat and it sounds cool. So I let it go because technically, yeah, I could have had them roll for it, but they'd already succeeded. So I was going to let them do it. Now, I did make sure that they rolled a dexterity saving throw to see if the T-Rex fell on them. But that was the consequences of their actions.
And that's fun. You can have consequences for succeeding on something.
Yeah.
If you tell me that I get to, I don't know, stab Darth Vader, but the entire Order of Clones might be pissed at me, I'm going to stab Vader. Like, that's dope. I accept my consequences.
Yes.
Well, I think that can drive the narrative or drive the story. Even like, if you propose actions that, exist in this sort of cinematic presentation, sure, you can throw that idea out there, and then the DM can respond by saying, well, sorry, but you did it. The consequences, though, weren't exactly what you were expecting, and then that back and forth play is the nature of storytelling. Sitting at a table and developing these stories together is something, I think that can only occur if you have the openness to say, all right, well, this conversation is happening. Where do we go from here? And what can we sort of add to it in a way that's really compelling and makes for the kind of game nights that you talk about months, if not years later.
Incredible.
On the DM side, a little bit like little nuts and bolts, some like actual things that you can take home on. Just for like a D&D style scenario, look at your monsters. A lot of times these things aren't powerful enough for the game that you're playing. If you're playing heroic fantasy, I do a standard 30% bump up on mine, and I also look because I want my crit of my monster to not one-shot my lowest player a lot of times, unless they have something that could mitigate that, where you're talking about a rogue evasion situation or something like that. But I want to strike fear, but I don't want to take away agency of this player at the beginning of the game. I want to set the stakes. I don't want to end the game for somebody. And I challenge you in all your games, especially in all of this, please re-look at rules that just remove people from playing. Take something away, but don't freeze their turn.
Right.
If it's a paralysis, maybe it doesn't set in all the way and they have to choose between their action and their bonus action, or tell them that you don't have your multi-attack, you only have one swing on this. Let them make a choice. No one wants to wait 40 minutes for their turn in a big party to ultimately decide that I am a non-factor in this and I have become, the lamb to this lion.
And to kind of chime in on use what the stat block gives you with your monsters and whatnot. For example, I have an NPC that is incredibly high level in Forgotten Paths, and nobody's figured it out yet, which is great. And they, what?
It's an amnesia campaign. Forget he said that.
Forget I said that. And for example, they have a stat block that one time they were making tea, and I just let them use a time stop because it would instantly steep according to everyone else.
Excuse you.
Yep. And one of the players saw it, and it indicated, oh God, when we fight this creature, how much power do they have if they can burn a time stop on steeping tea? And those little building blocks, I think, will really heighten some of that tension there.
I'm just reacting because there's some choices you've made that you didn't. You know what?
It might not have been wise to have your players on this specific panel with you.
We're here to argue now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's set tiers.
Everybody can look away so that there's no eyewitnesses to whatever's about to happen.
Set tiers for your monsters.
Yeah.
Don't, I like to say that you have legendary and mythical creatures. Whatever the category you want to give them, let your players know what you're not going to let them freeze their turn out with, like a hold person or something. Don't let your big bad be compromised. That is a conversation to do ahead of time, not when it happens. And all of a sudden you have to look your player in the eye and go, this is going to be a poor return for the entire group in this giant scenario. But here I am because I'm a poor communicator and haven't had this conversation, and now I have to tell them, no, you can't do the cool thing that you want to do.
Yeah. I do want to make sure we have time for questions.
Oh, yeah,
so it is that time. So please line up in an orderly manner behind this microphone. And one person up there already. And we will answer questions. Obviously, we have a lot of people on this, so not everybody, I think, can chime in on every question. But we want to make sure Gabe's out. Gabe's like, I'm gone.
Gabe's got a question.
Oh, Gabe's got a question? Oh, my God! Oh, my God!
Get wrecked.
Nice.
No, he's just...
Knowing my luck, Gabe's just going to eviscerate me again. Is it turned off? Because it was working last panel. Take this one. I don't need it.
Whisper in his ear.
I really like the idea of taking Noah's mic. Thank you.
No, I do too.
This is very dead. Okay.
Okay, cool. Hi, panelists. Thank you for your time. Hi. As a fellow GM and TTRPG adventure writer, I just wanted to give you all a quick, easy question. What is your favorite lair action? Or most memorable lair action? Because I know that writing for randos every week, I have to give them legendary resistances, legendary actions, but I love writing lair actions because you can get really creative with them. So, please.
Actually, screw what I said before. Everyone go ahead and answer this question.
You start then.
Okay. So my favorite lair action, oh God, it's honestly all about the aboleth, and I kind of wrote one. Aboleths are amazing creatures. But I wrote a new one for an aboleth where I had my players encountered an aboleth, and the aboleths have a lot of abilities in your mind and control their ancient creatures. So my favorite lair action was anyone who entered the lair, at one time they were able to create a complete illusion, and the players could roll to see if they could see through it, but it was a very high check. And so my aboleth used it to turn the entire lair into a carnival at which they were the center. It was really cool. But yeah, so basically something that messes with the players as soon as they enter the lair.
All my layer actions are my children, and I can blame Destiny for this, for increasing DPS checks over the time. I morph them, I put layer actions in the middle of the initiative. No matter what everybody else rolls, that layer action is there, and it is looming at the same time. It can morph into different things, but most of all, it always increases its stakes each round. Yes. And it can come from whether it's just the damage number, or it could come from the type of save. You know, in case I have a bunch of monks and rogues rolling around, all of a sudden we have to have that cone of cold style action to settle everybody down with a con save. So you need to be active on what your party has, so some people don't just dominate the overuse of the dexterity save. Yep. But I'm looking for something that does group damage, because you don't want to overload with all these ads sometimes in the campaign. This is the perfect time to have a big bad with a great layer action that's going to bring that health down to raise the stakes without having to take 100 actions with imps flying around or something. Right, yeah.
I say this with so much love. I hate layer actions. It's a very love-hate relationship. I love it because it makes an epic encounter. Hate it because they're terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once again, he hasn't killed me yet. He's trying.
I'm trying.
Well, when I think about an action that occurs in a space, like I'm thinking as a map maker and as a world builder. So, for instance, I just created a marshland. And in this marshland, there are these creatures that showed up called grootkikers, which essentially is Dutch for big frog. Now, the mechanic or the function of that swamp isn't necessarily just to be a pretty environment, but when I was doing research for the encounter, I went out to a local national wildlife refuge and noticed that there was all this duck grass over the surface of the water. And that water was beautiful and shallow, and you could see what was going on underneath the surface, except where that carpet of grass sat on top. And it was the perfect cover. So things that could be 5 feet from the edge of your boat, you can't see. but can see you perfectly well. And if any of you ever have seen alligators in a swamp, especially at night.
On occasion.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Or if you don't even see them on the surface of the water because their eyes are just barely poking out, but if it's at night and you shine a light, they're all there. But the ability for the characters not to see what is right around the corner, but to know, like, what the hell was that sound? That tension for me is what builds the kind of environment that can scare the hell out of your characters and tell a story that is epic, but also has a mechanic that is directly playable in a combat encounter where you've got great cover and you've essentially got a space that the characters are absolutely unfamiliar with that can just spawn all sorts of strange things.
I'm going to go quick. Anything that allows me to emotionally manipulate my players. That is my answer for most questions, just so you know. But anything that I can trap them in an illusion of like their greatest joy or their biggest fear or the moment in time that they were happiest, which I almost got one of my players with one time. Like anything that I can just like twist that emotional knife, that's what I want. As I've said before, my goal is tears.
Yeah.
How do you want me to follow that? For the sake of speed, I'm going to say this, and it needs context, so it won't make any sense. Every bite kills a family member. Okay, go ahead.
Holy shit. Okay. So we'll be a little bit quicker.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Great question. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Hey, this is like my first time up here, but I went to your last panel. I think you guys are awesome, first of all. The question I have is, have you guys ever homebrewed a big boss and with the intention of it being defeated but never being beaten like that?
For me, one of the big bads in one of my campaigns was an existing archdevil that can't be killed but can be beaten. I had to homebrew the means of their incarceration, which was hard. It was really hard. And it took me literally a year to figure it out. But yeah, definitely.
A lawyer would make somebody incarcerated in their game. Can we mention that? The irony here? I had to incarcerate my villain.
Phases. The party can still win without them being defeated, and that creates epic big bads. Just go back and look at Final Fantasy. You can keep having somebody steep and use them later.
Yep. Cool.
Can you describe in one sentence one of the weirdest, most epic encounters you've had to experience?
As a player, as a GM.
Either one.
Or as a human being?
Start down there.
Me and Sam are ready. Are you ready at the same time?
1, 2, 3.
We went to the Bunghole Tavern.
Really, really fast. I watched a turtle rob a convenience store. Sorry, a tavern store.
Was he fast?
To make it fast, I had two absolute random strangers that I had never met before literally call me by name in the space of about 2 or 3 days and start very interesting conversations with me that I won't repeat because this is way too short of a conversation. But
Podcast.
yeah. That's
In order to do a masquerade heist that I had been planning for literal years, they decided that their barbarian monk bard was going to wear a giant rat costume and run around the kitchen in an attempt to scare away the kitchen staff. And it did, in fact, work.
I grew up with Chuck E. Cheese. I know that rat.
oh, that is a terrifying name.
Because that's him.
I'll chime in with that halfling polymorphed into a goose and dropped golden egg bombs on everybody.
I trapped my players in a Russian nesting doll and then trapped that in 7 other Russian nesting dolls.
That's how you see it. That's a lot to unpack.
those are okay except for that last one. That's fucked up. As a perma player, that's wrong. Don't do that. As a perma player, thank you, Seth, my eternal GM. Thank you for killing me multiple times, you bastard. You rat bastard man.
We love you.
You beat me with a tree. It was level 1, monster. Environments are really interesting for encounters, but how am do map good? Because I look at them, and my GMs will freely admit all the time,
How do you, are you asking how to draw effective maps, or how to think
are there
about?
like features that to consider for like encounter designs? Like
That is a huge discussion. One of the, if I could leave you with one thing, don't overdraw it, and just let the little things sort of stand for themselves and give the image plenty of room to breathe.
Cool. Also, this was the right height for me. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. So you mentioned that letting your players encounter the BBEG at some point helps raise the stakes a little bit. But whenever I've been playing, I've been seeing an issue where they'll show up, we'll have the time to like talk to them, but the players always leave feeling frustrated. Like in Curse of Strahd will show up and he'll disappear before we can really do anything, and everyone's just like, well, what was that about? Like, how do you make that more intimidating rather than
Let
just
him catch
annoying?
him.
Yeah.
He's got stuff that can get away. He can go into a gaseous form. There's multiple levitudes of ways that they can escape. If the cold out dimension door makes your players feel that they haven't finished it off, give them a taste. Maybe they do. Maybe he actually does die in front of them, but doesn't. You have to phrase it and set it to their expectations. You got to give them a kernel. You can't always take it away.
Not even just let them catch him, but what if he wants to be caught?
Additionally, your BBEG shouldn't have anything to prove to the players, and that should come across. That does help it make more intimidating. If they're not trying to scare the players because they are insignificant, that comes across and makes them more confident and scarier.
Yeah. Great question. All right, question. 2 more questions.
All right. This one is mostly for Mike Schley. When you're like making a map and an encounter, what are some good ways to like sort of divide up space to like make it more of a like I guess an interactive space?
So you'd want to think. So when I think about maps, I honestly go back to the work of artists in the non-gaming realm, like Miro. When I'm I honestly think about abstract art quite a bit when I'm thinking about a map, in that I'm looking at how elements of the landscape operate as positive and negative space, open space. And it's essentially building an aesthetically interesting space that allows for, mountain ranges to exist, but there's valleys that exist between the ranges. One of the worst things that I've seen in image making is when everything, including the kitchen sink, is there and somebody doesn't have a chance to breathe when looking at the image. Because the impulse is to throw all your ideas out there at once. But like if you're writing music, you've got to have moments where the denouement or the tension and the visual action slows down to the point where someone can catch their breath. And for me, that's like the difference between the Shire and Mount Doom, It's an emotional translation of visual imagery. So the things that you want to draw are essentially routes for the mind to explore space and to have moments to breathe and moments to really focus in a way that's visually appealing. And I could probably spend days talking about that, but I'll go ahead.
On this panel.
I have one thing to add to you. If you have a character in your game that's like a bard, a support player, somebody who is looking for area of denial, give them something. Sometimes you can get a map that's too wide open, and all of a sudden they don't have things to tether to. But if you throw in a Tom Cardos ox cart, it's my favorite. Throw in that ox cart and a bale of hay over here, all of a sudden you got something to tether to and interact with. Only if that's one of your players that's there and thinking of that. Giving them that option's awesome.
And maps don't always have to be accurate. The space that's in a map that isn't drawn, the unknown country, is just as compelling as what's actually there.
Exactly. And we're out of time, so last question.
Last question, a nice easy one for you.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about DMs. How about the players? Can you tell us a time where the player surprised you by turning a neutral encounter into an epic one?
Yeah, remember what I said about the goose? Yeah, the goose dropping giant egg bombs on people. That, I was just not ready. I was not ready. Oh, and then the time that they killed Kevin McAllister from Home Alone.
Wait, what? There might have been a time that I proved the science of grease fires. Basically, the paladin was rude, so I dropped him in a well, and the GM was like, "Oh, they're just gonna wander around the town," and then I started a grease fire in a well.
Oh no!
Gabe.
Look, it was my first time.
Your first time committing arson, or your first?
That is also one way to deep fry a turkey.
That's not how that works.
It is. It is. I can vouch.
All right. So, everybody, thank you so much for coming to Epic Encounters.
Yes.
We have more panels this weekend. Remember, you're all awesome, and you can all make